You've just caught me eating my breakfast. It reminds me of today's story, when Jesus and his friends, the disciples, had breakfast together. Well, it was a bit more like a barbecue by the side of the lake. Now, you remember that Jesus' friends, the disciples, had been hiding in an upper room. And one day, Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "I'm coming too," said another disciple. "And me." And so a group of them decided to go off fishing. Now, maybe Peter had had enough of being shut up in that upper room and he wanted to get out into the fresh air. Or maybe he wanted to go back to doing something that he was familiar with so that he would have time to think and mull over all the things that had been happening. We don't know. But Peter and some of the other friends went out in a boat. They fished all night and they didn't catch anything. Well, I'm going to read the rest of the story. We find it in the book of John, which is in the new part of the Bible. It's the last chapter, chapter 21, and I'm going to start reading from verse 4. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the other side of the boat and you'll get some." So they did. And they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." For when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, he jumped into the water, and he headed for the shore. The others stayed with the boat. They pulled the loaded net to shore, for they were only about 100 yards away from the shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire, and some bread. "Bring some of the fish you've caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't even torn. "Now come here and have some breakfast," Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time that Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he'd been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. A third time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Well, I wonder if you noticed that the beginning of that story is like another story. It's the beginning. It's like the time, isn't it, when Jesus first met the disciples on the lake. There they were. They'd been fishing all night and they hadn't caught anything. And Jesus had told them to put their net on the other side of the boat. And then there were so many fish, they had trouble getting the nets up and the fish into the boat. And it was exactly the same. I wonder if maybe Jesus was reminding his friends, the disciples, about that incident when he first met them. And the fact that actually Jesus had gone on to say to them, hadn't he, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." In other words, follow me and I will help you to tell others about me. And maybe he was reminding them that they still needed to do that. Again, when he was talking to Peter and he said, "Feed my lambs," that's exactly what he meant. He wanted Peter to go on telling people about him and about God's love for them, for sending the rescuer. Well, the second part of the story, it reminds us of God's love for Peter, doesn't it? If you remember when Jesus was on trial and the chief priests, he was in the temple courts and Peter was outside in the courtyard. 3 times he was asked if he knew Jesus, if he was with him, and Peter said no. Each time he didn't know him. Maybe Jesus was giving Peter the opportunity to put this right because he knew all about it, didn't he? And actually, he had forgiven Peter because he never stopped loving him. But he was giving him this chance to say sorry for what he'd done by saying 3 times that he loved Jesus. Well, Jesus knows when we mess things up and do the wrong things, when we perhaps don't tell others about him, or he just knows everything, doesn't he? And when we come to him and we say we're sorry, he forgives us because he loves us. And he never, ever, ever stops loving us. So let's thank him for that now, shall we? Father God, we thank you that you love us and that you never, ever stop loving us. Thank you that you forgive us when we do things that are wrong, when we mess things up, because you love us. And we thank you and help us to tell others about you. Forgive us for the times when we don't, when we perhaps pretend we don't know you, just like Peter did. We mess it up. But help us to tell others about you. Amen. Well, I'll see you all next time. Bye. I'm going to get on and eat my breakfast now.